Anuj, thank you so much for joining us in this session. It's a free flowing session, folks, wherein the whole idea is to answer as many questions. Product management is a very ambiguous, very amorphous field. It is not as specific as a lot of other technical roles that exist. That's a good thing. It's a bad thing. Good thing because that basically means if you have any skills and you have inclination towards becoming a product manager, there's a good chance you can become one. You just need to find out your niche and you need to enter that. The bad thing about this is because it's amorphous. There's a whole uh, plethora of knowledge out there, which is not specific to you, and it can confuse you. Because it's pretty much like I keep comparing this to the elephant and the blind man scenario, where you might be looking at the trunk, you might be looking at the feet, and you might be looking at the tail, and you might be figuring out product management very differently. So a lot of fun days out there on the internet are about consumer product management, which is very different from B2B product management, which is very different from internal product, which is very different from external product, and so on and so forth, right? Which creates a lot of confusion, right? We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Let's pick up the first question itself, which is how technical do you need to be, right? Um, it honestly depends, like I just mentioned, it honestly depends on what kind of role are you entering. So product management is not the same everywhere, okay? Um, Depends heavily on what is the definition of the product that you're going to manage, right? So if your product is going to be very technical, like for example, if you are planning to be an AWS, or let's say CleverTap, or let's say Amplitude, or one of the many technical, Postman for example, or Zoom for instance. If you want to be a product manager in any one of these companies, you better be very technical, because you will be talking about technical stuff with your developers day in day out. Okay. So you need to be very technical. What that means is you need to understand system architecture, you need to understand how data structures work, you need to understand how caches work, how APIs work, you need to understand all of these things really well, because without that you'll not be able to define a lot of these requirements. Having said that, this is still very overarching field, very very overarching, very generalized statement that I just made. Even in Zoom for example, depending on whether you are product manager for partnerships, which is much more a business strategy role, versus user experience, which is the experience that we're talking about, which is way more technical, because right now there are 26 people in this call, and all of you are attending, like, from, I don't know, God knows where, from where and what kind of network are you connecting via. um, but still you would want the voice to be reaching to you in the lowest latency possible, in as clarity as possible. The video should be reaching to you if possible, and at what resolution and what size, blah blah blah. Some might have joined via mobile phone, some might have joined via browser, some might have joined via Windows. So somebody who's going to be owning this product, which is a front facing the user experience, will have to be bloody very technical, right? And this is the consumer side technical, right? And on the other hand, similarly, there would be somebody uh, who's managing the back end of whatever is going on right now, right? Uh, they are called different services, different products in different companies. For example, let's call it platform product at Zoom. The platform product might be the Muxing. Muxing is basically a technology that allows multiple streams of videos to come together and then transmit to the relevant client. Sorry if I'm making it sound very technical, but essentially Muxing is, in very simple term, think of it like a Rajiv Chowk in Delhi and Dadar in Bombay, right? A single place where a lot of streams are coming together, and then they're distributed to the relevant clients basis how the client is connecting to that Muxer, right? Now that guy is going to be bloody very technical on a very different front. He needs to understand video streaming. He needs to understand audio streaming. He needs to understand ISPs, DNS. He needs to understand 1,000 things. Apart from the fact that he needs to understand muxing and all of these fancy things that exist, right? So depending on what kind of role you're going for, you need to be very technical or non-technical. Uh, so what does it mean for you or for everybody else who is kind of scared? I think this is the पिछले 2.5 साल में, if there's one question that has been asked to me like 1,000 times, this it will be this question: how technical one has to be. Um, Honestly, uh, depending on your ambition, you can choose to be very technical or extremely non-technical. You can basis that, let's say for example, you decide or you realize that okay, I just don't understand these things. I do not have a knack for it. It is too hard for me. That's perfectly okay. Remove those companies or those roles from your chart. Still, there are ample companies out there who are looking for business strategy product managers, who are looking for other product managers who do not need to be very technical, right? So there's ample for everyone. You just need to pick up the niche you want to enter. Anuj, what do you think?
So absolutely, I think you summed it very well in terms of the technical skills required in a product manager. I think it's basically a curve where on a scale of, let's say, not a 0 to 100, but maybe a 20 to 100, the technical skills would vary. Now, typically, what I've seen so far in multiple companies is that for product management roles that require a lot of technical expertise, they actually create a different stream of product managers altogether. It's called technical product managers, which is very different from technical program managers, which is a different thing altogether. But I suspect most of us are here for product management roles. So I think a lot of the backend APIs, a lot of the underlying infrastructure, those are very technical in nature. And typically companies, they have a very specified technical product manager management role defined for them with a specified skill set. So for example, in Amazon, there's a distinction between product managers, which are more around business, UX, customer, and product managers technical. So there are two different job functions, and typically even though the compensation and the pay packages would typically remain the same across the two, but the skill sets are very different, right? Now, having said that, I think what I've also seen is typically irrespective of whether you are a non-technical person or not, right? When it comes to product management, it always helps to have a bit of a technical expertise behind you, right? So for example, even imagine a scenario where you are running a direct to consumer brand, which is a very simple, to start off with, very simple e-commerce website, right? And then you kind of create some experiences around shopping on that, right? Now, as you grow in complexity in the business, you would realize that you would need to add a bunch of capabilities on that, right? And those capabilities would be on both on the front end as well as back end, right? Now, while you may require your requirements in a very simple English terms, right? But when it comes to executing those requirements with the technical team, it would help you to understand their language, because otherwise, when it comes to execution, you won't be able to get to the best solution if you don't understand what tech team is talking about, right? So some bit of technical expertise would definitely help. And I think there are multiple resources available on the internet for you to understand how do mobile apps work, what is the MVC architecture, what are the APIs, right? I think those broad level skill set would be available.
I think very well said, Anuj. I fully agree to what you're saying. Um, Overall, I think another analogy I think which I've lived with since 10 years is if you want to run a cycle shop, you do not have to like really know everything, but you need to know, at least need to know how a puncture gets fixed, and let's say how a gear actually works. You need to know that. You will get an expert to do it for you, but you still need to know so that you can tell him that, hey, I want to go faster, so you give me this kind of gear, give me this kind of gear ratio, right?
Yeah.
um, so there are a few more questions which are coming up in the chat. Folks, please go ahead and please start putting up the questions in the chat itself. I think that will be very efficient. Um, Suresh has a question. How can a PM with B2B background transition for B2C products? Also, how does a PM from non-ecom back domain move to products in ecom domain? So basically, there are two questions. One is much more to do with B2B to B2C transition, and second question is a shift in domain itself, like moving from ecom to ecom. Um, I will take the first question. Anuj, you take the second question. Your expertise is much better there. So B2B transition to B2C. I think for every transition, what needs to think about is what are the what are the skills which are transferable, and what are the things that you'll have to learn again. So in B2C products, Okay. So in B2B products, you are most likely going to be talking to very few customers, right? You'll be talking to the fewer customers, number one, and number two, there's a good chance it'll be easier for you to talk to those customers. The customers are going to come to you that, hey, I want this to be fixed, or hey, I'm looking for so and so, or hey, if you give me this, I'm going to give you additional $100,000 of cash, right? Um, so the connection, the communication line between you as a PM with the customer, the client, is decently open, right? And you can speak little freely. I'm not, when I'm saying B2B here, I'm talking about proper B2B. I'm not talking about the SaaS companies who are selling at $5, $10, because that is quasi B2C. Okay. In the sense that you cannot speak to the customers that freely. At $5, $10, there's a good chance you might be working with 100,000 customers and you will not be able to speak to all of them that easily. I'm talking about B2B companies like CleverTap and WebEngage, for example, where they have like 1,000, 2,000 customers, and they will have ample communication line open. So the reason I'm emphasizing on this is because this is exactly where everything, this is what makes the entire difference. In B2B, because you are able to speak to the customers fairly easily, you can gauge and gather the requirements relatively easily. Okay, you exactly know what they are facing trouble in. Versus in B2C products, and when I say B2C products, Amazon is a B2C product, which has like millions of users. Facebook is a B2C product. Instagram is, let's say, I don't know, what is the latest fancy thing. MX Takatak is a is a B2C product, for example. Now, in these cases, you cannot talk to the customer directly. You can choose to, but it's very, very hard, because even if you try to speak to these people, you'll be able to speak to, let's say, 50 people, 20 people, 100. You are extremely aggressive, 500 people if you're lucky. That too will take like 6 months, right? But that again is going to be very, very small sample size of the entire audience that you have, the number of users who are using the product. In which case, even if you do your user research and even if you talk to them, you'll not be able to gather that kind of requirements from the interviews or direct talking. So you need to develop product sense as to what is my aggregate audience looking for. So you need to be able to develop a good product vision. You need to be able to develop a good amount of product need as to, or estimate, or identify the product need that an aggregated audience of 1 million users, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, or even 5 lakh people is looking for. And it is not easy. It is very, very hard, extremely hard. Okay. Um, so to become that B2C, B2B to B2C product manager, this is exactly what you need to develop in yourself. You will have all the other skill sets in place. You will be able to spec very well. You might be able to set up the requirements very well. You might be able to do 1,000 things very well. But the difference that B2B versus B2C is that in B2C, you cannot speak to the users very easily. So it's very hard to gather requirements. So you need to guess. So how well can you guess and how well can you educate yourself on that is what makes the entire difference, which is where you develop your product sense. You need to develop a very good sense of insight as to what is my user behaving, and if they're behaving this way, why are they behaving that way, right? What is the root cause behind that behavior? So psychological understanding of your users. Are they coming from tier 2? Are they coming from tier 3? Do they have trust deficit, or they have some other issue, right? So you need to figure those things out. I think that's the crux of the matter, in my opinion. Rest, there is a whole laundry list of skills that you need to figure out between the two. But there's a thick pile of skills that you can transfer from B2B to B2C. Okay, so don't worry about that. The only thing you have to figure out is the psychological understanding of your users, why they are behaving the way they're behaving. And the only way to understand that is looking at data, instrumenting. First of all, you don't even know what you're looking for. That's the you know incredibly awesome thing about B2C. You don't even know what you're looking for. So you have to instrument, you need to put in the right signals, and you need to seed your entire product in the right way so that you can start looking for data from left, right, and center, and then figure out, okay, this is what my users are behaving this way. So let me create a hypothesis around it. Let me run an experiment around it, and let me see if it works or not. This is hard. This is very, very hard. Okay, which B2B products do not usually face. Anuj?
Yeah, I think absolutely you covered it well. And I think to answer the question about how does somebody move from a non-ecom function or a vertical to a ecom vertical, I think a lot of what Talvinder you just talked about applies to that as well. I think the one of the differences, and this is coming from somebody who has made the transition from a B2B to a B2C function. So I worked in Adobe for a long time. Then I moved to e-commerce companies, right? So one of the biggest differences I've seen the way e-commerce works is actually two. One is in terms of velocity at which these companies move, right? The e-commerce companies, right? So typically a release cycle in a B2B company would be in, let's say, in 1 quarter or in 2 quarters, right? A 3 to 6 months is a normal release cycle for any big release, right? Whereas in B2C, the release cycles are actually much shorter. They can be as low as 2 weeks, right? So the sheer velocity at which you move, right, in e-commerce, that is like very high. Orders of magnitude higher than what you see in B2B. So you have to be, prepared for that. From a mindset point of view, you have to be prepared for it, right? You have to be prepared to move fast. You have to kind of, make sure that you're moving all the time. You have to, whenever, you don't have good insights, go with your gut, run some experiments, right? So that is one. Second is, I think in e-commerce, what happens is that typically there's a lot of collaboration that happens across multiple teams that typically does not happen in B2B, right? So imagine a typical e-commerce, example where somebody on the shopping side, on the shopping funnel side, wants to maximize conversion, right? Now they would notice that a lot of people are not buying the product because the delivery speeds are too low, right? So they will come up with an option to have a faster delivery speed. Now that will necessarily have an implication on the operation side where the operations team needs to be ready to support that faster delivery speed, right? That is just one example. So in e-commerce, whenever you take a decision or whenever you need to kind of create a product, you would need to work with multiple cross-function teams for you to actually make a successful product, right? And that is another big difference. So mentally, you have to be ready to kind of provide leadership to cross-function teams and provide visibility to what the constraints and trade-offs are when you're thinking about a product. I think if you're able to communicate your skill set into both of these functions, transition to a B2C kind of e-commerce role becomes a lot easier.
Perfect, perfect. I think velocity is a very very important point that you mentioned, because that overwhelms a lot of PMs. That I'm just not able to figure out this sprint. How will I figure out the next sprint? Uh, and regarding moving from one domain to another, which is non-ecom to ecom, what are the special things in your opinion? I think the operational insights. I think that's perfectly bang on.
Right.
What else somebody has to bother about, because ecom is a hot market. People like to go to ecom.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the biggest one I would say, again, it goes back to the cross functional areas I was talking about. Typically, one of the things I've noticed is that you have to worry about the entire journey of the customer, right? So
Right.
typically, let's assume somebody like a Dropbox, right? Now, Dropbox is a pure software product, right? Or let's say somebody like a flights booking company like a Make My Trip, right? Now that's a purely software product, right? Unless
Right.
e-commerce where the physical delivery actually happens at your doorstep, right? So the journey in that e-commerce space is actually very long, right?
Right.
And then you have to think about the entire experience, right, from shopping to the delivery to even post delivery, right? So somebody may have gotten a damaged product, he may want to return it, or right, somebody may want to cancel, or right, and then there's an aspect around cash delivery, right? So those are the nuances that actually come into play when you talk about e-commerce, right? And whenever you think about any product, any new product that comes into play, typically you have to think about all of these cross-functional journeys at each and every step of the process, right? And think about how does it impact that, right? A
Right.
good example is Amazon Prime, right? When it was launched in US, right? It was not just a software. You have to make huge investments in the logistics, in the transportation network, and in the fulfillment centers to stock that inventory, and then enable your transportation fleet to actually support same day shipping or next day shipping, right?
Right.
And then obviously be able to support those free cancellations, right? Which will impact the bottom line as well, because that's a cost to the company, right? So those are the elements that we will need to think about in e-commerce.
Absolutely, absolutely, exactly. I think the customer journey mapping in e-commerce or similar fields like hospitality or similar, they go from online to offline to again online, and that is pretty hard because there are certain elements you can track, there are certain elements you can't track, so it becomes a little harder. um, Kush has a question: how do you tailor your resume for a PM role even if you do not have a prior product experience? What do you think, Anuj?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one, right? And I'm assuming that again, it depends on what background really you're coming from, right? So, for example, if you're a software developer or if you're a program manager in a tech company, right? Then the way you would tailor your resume would be very different than, for example, if you're coming from a different vertical altogether. So, for example, somebody coming from a CPG company, right? In sales function, for example, the way he or she would tailor their resume would be very different from the way a software developer would tailor their resume. I
Absolutely.
think in general, the way I think, the way I would approach this problem is to, again, one think about what company are we really applying to. Is it a B2B company or is it a B2C company, right? And then try to map, what are the skill sets required in to succeed in that role, right? So, for example, we just talked about B2C companies where ability to move fast, ability to instrument, right, ability to kind of get a pulse of the customer, looking at the data, right? All of those skill sets are very, very important. And if you're able to demonstrate those aspects of your skill set in your previous experience, whatever that experience might be, I think that would be a great way for you to kind of tailor your resume accordingly, right? So ultimately, it depends on what role are you aspiring to, right, and what are the skill sets required to succeed in that role, right? If you are able to do that mapping, then that will be the starting point to tailor your resume.
I think I'll just add one couple of lines to this. Uh, I think one of the easiest way to imagine this would be when you're talking about joining a company as a product manager or any role for that matter. Essentially, what you're doing is you're selling your 1 year subscription at a certain contract value, right? That okay, give me 50 lakhs and I'm going to be dedicating the entire year about 2,000 hours, 2,500 hours of the entire year to you, right? So when you're saying resume is essentially a sales pitch. So just like if you're making a sales pitch, you will do some research about the company you're going to sell to. You'll do some research. You'll figure out who am I going to interview, who is going to look at the sales pitch, and accordingly you'll create the benefit statements. You'll make everything else right. Similarly, your resume. If you're going for a B2C, you would want to highlight you are a developer and you're going for a B2C company, for example. Then you would want to show that okay, I am a developer. I am used to shipping fast. I am used to being very agile. I am used to be a problem solver, and my problems I have and I've solved problems which had impact, which created a big impact, and I contributed not just as a developer, but I contributed as a problem solver, right? So you would want to present your those aspects about your entire profile, right? Versus B2B versus something else. Yeah. Another question, I think, Anuj, you are better suited to answer this, which is what is the difference between a product manager and a program manager? And I have seen companies like Microsoft having positions like program manager and not product manager. So, what's the difference?
Yeah, actually, these are two different questions. So let me take the second question first, right? Uh, which is about Microsoft in general. I think that's probably the biggest anomaly in the software companies where the program managers there are called actually product managers, but that is just purely from a nomenclature point of view, right? So Microsoft, program managers are actually product managers in all senses of the word in other companies, right? That is just how nomenclature works, right? But in most other companies, so you can talk about Amazon, or you can talk about, let's say, Booking or OYO Rooms or Make My Trip or any other company that you can think about, right? There are two different roles about around product management and program management, right? And to me, the biggest difference is around the strategy and the execution bit of it, right? Typically, in product management, you would define the product strategy and you would also execute it. And depending on the level and depending on the company, that role could be split equally between 50-50 between strategy and execution. It could be 20-80, it could be 80-20, right? Again, depending on where you are and which company you're operating in. So that's about product management. Typically in program management, most of it is around execution, right? where you say that, hey, once the product strategy is defined and once the feature is defined, how do you kind of then execute that feature? How do you kind of bring it to the market? How do you make sure that the feature is successful? So bulk of the program managers actually end up doing that. And in some companies, program managers are also responsible for bringing the cross-functional alignment into picture in cases where there is deep kind of alignment required. I think we just talked about e-commerce as one of the prime examples. So in e-commerce, you could see that the program managers actually play a very pivotal role in terms of getting every team aligned onto a particular big initiative, right? So that is, at least what I've seen in my career so far, that is the biggest difference between product management and program management.
So on that same vein, if you can touch upon, because program manager sounds very much like a product owner. So what's the difference?
Yeah. So as I said, right, I think typically, and again, product owner in a lot of companies actually are product managers as well, right? And there are like very amorphous definitions of what these are on, right? I would say that program managers typically don't end up owning the PRDs and the PRDs, right? That's the domain of the product managers. Program managers are not supposed to carry out, let's say, the UATs of the product. That again is something that product managers end up doing, right? Program managers, what they really help out is that once you talk to once the BRD has been written, right, then how do you really execute that BRD? How do you make sure that that project plan is on track, right? How do you make sure that if there are dependencies on third parties, how do you track them? How do you resolve them, right? And how do you make sure that the overall program is on track? And there's a lot of detailed nuances in that as well. That's a different expertise required altogether. And to be and I think what I've seen is that a good program manager can add a lot of value in terms of creating that sustainable rhythm in which you're churning out releases after releases, and that too high quality releases. Without program managers, I've not seen many companies being too successful in kind of creating those uh, great products, right, which customers really want, right? So that's how typically the rules would differ.
Right, right. Uh, Next question is okay. Shardul has a question. Which are the certifications which provide value on your resume for a PM? Okay. Anuj, you take it, then I'll answer.
Well, I don't have any certifications so far in my career. I didn't have them. So, but I think the answer to that is uh, having a certification does not hurt. Right? Let me put it this way. Right? So, for example, if you have a data science certification from a Coursera, or if you have a another like agile certification, I think these really help because these nuances matter when it comes to creating great products, right? But the way I would view these certifications is necessary but not sufficient, right? So these certifications, can be a building block to becoming a great product management and having that great career. But it does not mean that if you don't have them, it will not be you can't have success, right? Uh, I think the way I view certifications is that if you think that there is some area which is a growth area for you, right? For example, if instrumentation is a growth area and you don't have enough expertise in that, then yeah, absolutely take a certification in analytics, right? Understand how product analytics work, right? Understand how they're instrumented, maybe understand how Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics work, right? All of those definitely would help to kind of help you bridge that gap.
Absolutely. I think this is something which I've been saying even before I launched Pragmatic and during Pragmatic, and I think I'll keep saying till I die. No certification or no degree, nothing matters. Honestly, we have entered that age where it doesn't matter where you're coming from. What matters is what skills do you own. That's all, and how well are you demonstrating it. We have already entered that age, whether you believe it or not. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are that we belong to that age. We were born in that era, almost all of us, where we were told right from the bachpan, or the conditioning was that hey, you need to have a paper to prove that hey, you are capable of something. Interestingly, if you have a chota bhai or somebody around you who is like 20 years old right now, just ask him, and his aspirations are going to will completely baffle you, completely baffle you. You're like, bhai, I think I'll have to I'll have to earn enough to even take care of him. Right? There's a good chance, very good chance. So in PM, if I just narrow the answer to just PM, no certification matters. Whether it is pragmatics, whether it is, and I'm being very blunt and honest about this, having pragmatic certification will only indicate to somebody like Anuj that okay, this person was serious enough and is passionate enough to learn something. But I'm not going to hire because he's from Pragmatic. I may give him a chance to at least interview. I may do that, right? But beyond that, you will have to prove it in the interview that I am capable. That's all. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. Your MBA degree, your Fluke University, or anything else, nothing matters. Let me be very blunt and straight about that. Okay. So please focus on skills, and that's all. If you have skills, people are going to hire you. If you do not have skills, no certification matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I completely echo that, right? What matters is the intent, right? What matters is your ability to kind of demonstrate to the employer that you care about this and you have developed a skill set around it, and that can
Correct.
happen with or without certification, right?
Correct.
That's how I would think about it as well.
Absolutely. And when I see a lot of certification on somebody's resume, I'll be like, okay, this person is self-aware. That's my learning from the resume. Okay, this person is self-aware that I want to do this. Okay. Number two, that this person is disciplined enough to finish the certifications. Because honestly, a lot of us start the certification, but we don't finish them. So this person is disciplined enough to finish the certification. I'll read it like that. And number three, if he has done one or two or maybe five certification, I've seen some of them doing 10 certification. I don't know how in the hell they get that kind of time, but like, if they have done 10 certifications, for example, I would definitely ask a good number of questions about it, right? Um, but that's about it. Nothing beyond that. Okay. So, Shadul, my sincere request is do not worry about certifications. Worry about do I have the skills to prove that I'm amazing at what I do. Okay. Avik has a question. How difficult is it to transition from software developer to product management role, and what are the skills mainly needed to for PM role? I can quickly take this question. How difficult? Honestly, it depends. If you are trying to be if you're a software developer trying to become a strategy product manager, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, simply because there's a lot of distrust amongst the leadership that software developers can handle business. Okay, because software developers, because of the conditioning that they have in terms of thinking, they end up becoming a very stringent problem solver, that too of a problem that is immediately present. That hey, I want to achieve this for my user, and I want to ensure that the user is able to achieve this in latency of, let's say, zero point 0.5 seconds. And they're going to be very they have a constraint which is already given to them, that you have to work in this constraint, and then they will excel. Okay, they're still solving problems, don't doubt that they're still solving problems, but their problem solving is very different than a product manager is going to be thinking without constraints, and has been conditioned to think without constraints. Okay, and then slowly start putting constraints and then designing the solution around it. So if you're going to be a strategy product manager, it's going to be a little difficult for a software developer, but you can easily become, the typical recommendation that I give is you become a technical product manager from software developer. And then once you have gained sufficient expertise, sufficient kind of uh, grounding, then you become whatever the kind of product manager you want to become. Some of our past students have who came in as a software developer. They became product manager at PayPal. They became PayPal technical product manager. Then they became one guy recently became the product manager at an AI company. Significant hike. Like I think that happened in this COVID period only. I think he came in at about 28-30 lakhs, and he exited at 47 lakhs. And that is because he was a developer. So I suggested him that, hey, because you're a developer, you have the edge to understand AI and similar fund is much better than a non-technical product manager. So if you improve your strategic fund days and you apply your technical fund days, you can score this company. He ended up scoring that company, got 47 lakhs. Uh, Great for him, great for us. Right. That's what I'll recommend. Anuj?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, right? I have seen some of the best product managers come from a software development background,
Hmm.
right? But having said that, I've also seen some of the worst product managers come from software development background as well, right? And I think for the reasons that Talvinder just talked about, which is around, I think when it comes to software development, typically, you know, the mindset that you would need to apply is more of a systems thinking mindset, where you need to kind of, think about, hey, this is what the problem is, and then you need to solve that problem, right? Whereas in product management, a lot of times you have to kind of, go a bit higher up and say that, hey, what is the problem in the first place, right? And then, conceptually define that problem and get clarity around that problem, and then create solutions around it, right? And typically, what I've seen is that software developers who excel in product management are able to make that transition, right? By getting into the shoes of the users, getting into the shoes of the customers, understanding their mindset, right? I think all the things that we earlier talked about, right? So if you're able to demonstrate some of those abilities, uh, as an individual, and by the way, these are not rocket science abilities, right? These are learnable, these are coachable. If you're able to demonstrate them, then as a software developer, you can have a very bright career in product management, and in your career as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And uh, software developers can make a ton of money as a product manager, to be very honest. Hina has a question. In the B2C model, what is the best way to gather users' feedback from users? Best way depends on the context, to be very honest. Like I just mentioned, in B2C, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Amazon? It's very hard to, it'll be very hard to do user interviews. Uh, if I give you very quick, if I just imagine a very simple two by two of behavioral versus attitudinal. Behavioral is what people do versus attitudinal is what people say. You will say that I'm going to be very healthy this year, and you'll be eating chole bhature tomorrow, right? Versus behavioral is what you are actually doing, right? So if you simply draw a two by two, so then behavioral is on the y-axis, attitudinal is on the x-axis. You can imagine that interviews is absolutely at the bottom left, right? That you're trying to understand what are people saying. When you're interviewing people, you are simply understanding what people are saying. Okay, they may not do what they're saying, but they're just saying something. And if you're at the very early stage of your company or of your product or your project, interviews is the best way to kind of gauge what people are saying and perhaps will do, right? Versus if you scale up, let's say you have, let's say, a million users, it'll be very hard to actually interview enough people. So you go to the other extreme is where the other extreme is being very quantitative. Okay, where you will do GA, Google Analytics, or Amplitude, or Mixpanel, where you will try to uh, looking at the data, you will try to aggregately estimate what people are liking or not liking. Okay, so the user feedback can happen in one of the two ways: very qualitative, interview side, or very quantitative, which is mixed panel, Google Analytics, etc. And then there are about 50 or 60 odd different methods in which you can acquire user feedback depending on what exactly you're looking for. Example, if you want to improve the conversion of a particular page, you can definitely do Google Analytics, but a better thing to do here would be heat mapping. You can use Hotjar or similar some other product, and you can heat map as to what are people exactly doing and what are people missing, right? That's a very different way of doing user feedback, right? Anuj?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you covered it well. Typically there is another terminology that a lot of software companies are using right now. It's called voice of the customer, right? And typically the best way to capture the voice of the customer is to listen to support calls, right? Customers are calling you with an issue, right? That's where you will get a lot of insights into, hey, this customer has a problem, right? Now, why is that problem happening, right? And that's where a lot of deep dive will happen, and you will then get to the root cause of the problem and end up fixing it. I've seen a lot of forward-looking companies, right? Like Adobe and Microsoft and Amazon, of course, right? All the leading companies in the world, all the top execs, right? Typically, they spend 1 day per quarter, the complete day per quarter. So imagine a VP of Amazon who's like earning multi-million dollars in salary, right? He or she is spending 1 day per quarter listening to customer calls, right? Because they want to get closer to the customer. They want to understand, where the problems are, what are the struggles customers are having, right? So you can imagine the power of that VOC, or the voice of the customer, right? And that is another great way to get user feedback into, what's happening within your products and within your space right now.
Absolutely. A related question for you, Anuj, is how do data analytics and product management come together? And follow up question to that is if you could throw some light on the data product manager role.
Yeah. I think data analytics, some of the talk you talked about, before, where you said that, hey, if you want to understand conversion, for example, you can look at Google Analytics, you can look at the drop off, right? You can look at, where is the single biggest drop off happening in the funnel, and then accordingly take steps to minimize that, right? Um, but I think data analytics, again, it depends on really the type of data you want to get out of it, right? So, for example, in Make My Trip, we developed an automated IVR solution which can address customer queries at the IVR itself, right? Now, the first data that we wanted to instrument was, forget about whether customers are able to get their queries resolved. We first wanted to understand what the uptime of the system is, right? If there are 100 calls happening, right, are those 100 calls being addressed by the automated IVR, right? And then you would then go into other metrics. For example, you would try to understand, of these 100 calls, how many people are pressing one, how many people are pressing two. Then if they're pressing one, are their queries getting handled, and then are they getting to support, right? So it really depends on what kind of instrumentation are you really talking about. In some cases, I think covered it before, where a company like Dropbox, they would have a very high standard on the latency part of it. So the moment you upload a file, how long does it take for the file to be synced up in the cloud? So there is a high bar on the latency metric of it. So again, data analytics is a very complex, very nuanced field, and depending on the product, the metrics will be very different, right? But I think the thought I want to leave with everybody here is that without data, without instrumenting properly the products, you would not be able to understand what are the things that you need to improve upon, right? And that, I think, is a very important thing for you to do, because a lot of your roadmap items would be derived from simply optimizing that data, right? Optimizing that metric. So that is very important.
Absolutely. If I just add one line to what Anuj has mentioned, data analytics scares a lot of people. It scares me as well, to be very honest. The statistics, the probability, a lot of these fun days, standard deviation, and all that, it kind of gets overwhelming for a lot of people, especially in a company where there's a lot of data getting produced every hour. As a PM, you don't have to worry about that too much. What you need to worry about is what kind of question do you want to get your data answer, right? So in your case, what Anuj gave just an example of, the question for a PM would have been, okay, how many people who called on the IVR, okay, what is a percentage split between the different options that people are picking up, one, two, three, four, and so on. Okay. Now for that, if you are adept, if you're dexterous, by all means dig out the data and start doing your research. Or you can always take help of a business analytics or somebody else, somebody else who can find that data for you. But if you simply throw a large database to somebody and say, hey, give me insights, they'll be like, dude, I can't do that, do your job for you, right? So the questions to ask, what you have to own is what questions your data has to answer. You have to own that. Then you can do it by yourself if you're capable. Otherwise, get somebody else to do it. Okay. Regarding a data product manager role, honestly, so data product manager role is again coming in different shapes and sizes. If you are in a company which is doing a lot of big data stuff, then it's a slightly different role. If you are in a company which is AI, then it's a very different role, because in that case you are looking at the input data that is coming in, the how clean it is, how accurate it is, how precise it is, etc., etc. What is how ephemeral it is. So is the data, like, data has a shelf life in a AI company, for example, right? So is it, if the data, for example, if you're talking about a satellite tracking of a company which does satellite tracking of real estate projects, right? Now that's an ephemeral data, right? The topography is changing almost every day, right? So for a system to be able to detect and figure out whether the project is actually working or not, it depends on a lot of ephemeral stuff, right? So it's a data product manager role. Different roles have different requirements. Um, the scope is highest right now in B2C. It's the scope is highest in AI companies, because they are looking for product manage. So data is the wireframe in AI companies, if I put it very bluntly or very crudely, right? So what they're looking for is somebody who can really imagine what kind of data is required for this kind of output, For example, if you want to create if you remember, there was a company called Prisma, an app that came out about Prisma about 2 3 years back, through which you could create a very funky looking filter of your image. You can create a image which would look like a Van Gogh painting on your mobile phone itself, right? Now, for that to happen, the data product manager would have collected a lot of paintings which will be from Van Gogh and would have given it to the backend developer that, hey, I want this kind of a output, right? So that is what a product manager would end up doing in that kind of company, right? In a big data company, which is most likely going to be B2B, the scenario is slightly different. Udit has a question for candidates coming from non-tech background. Does starting up a B2C company with the help of no-code platforms like Bubble.io framework help in landing a role in B2C product manager? Yes and no. Honestly, being an entrepreneur helps to be a product manager. It definitely helps because it's seen as somebody who can take initiative and who can take up things. But then again, honestly, the scene has changed a lot. There are wannabe entrepreneurs who are just doing it for the because it's cool and I want to be the CEO or something. And then there are people who are very serious about being an entrepreneur, right? Uh, about 5 years back, 8 years back, the scenario was very different because the risk was so high to be an entrepreneur that people used to not do it just for the heck of it. But nowadays, okay, I don't like my job. Let's become an entrepreneur for like 3 months. So it's a side project, right? And adapt and good interviewers like Anuj, for example, would be able to smell you from a mile away, whether you are a wannabe or you're an actual entrepreneur, right? So in your case, similarly, it doesn't matter whether you're using no code, you are actually using a code, doesn't matter. What matters is, were you able to identify a real problem? Did you actually solve that problem? Did you get actual customers and users, and how the entire experience was? What what uh, will be evaluated is, how did you come up with the idea? What was the logic behind it? How did you approach in solving it? um, when you face issues, what were the biggest issues, and when you face those issues, how did you solve it? I think that is where you will be evaluated on. It doesn't matter whether you're using bubble.io or you have the fanciest developer out there. Doesn't matter. Anuj, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And hey, first of all, I really appreciate the question and the fact that somebody took the effort to understand what no code platforms are all about. I think that in itself is a great sign. Now, having said that, I think I would frame this question or the answer to that a bit differently, right? And the way I would think about it is that what is that problem that you're trying to solve, right? So if the problem that you're trying to solve is that, hey, I want to get into product management, but I don't have enough tech background, then solve for that, right? So I have a very good friend, back from my ISB days, who went into sales, into IT sales for a long time, right? And then he moved to US and he went to Silicon Valley and he said that, hey Anuj, I want to now make a transition to product management. What do I do? So I told him that, hey, develop an app, develop a mobile app, right? And there are plenty of easy ways for you to do that. He took my advice and he developed that mobile app in 3 weeks, in 3 months. He kind of launched it on the Google App Store, right? And even though the app did not receive much traction, but again, it showed the recruiters the intent of doing something around it, right? And then from there he landed an internship into a company which was a startup, into product management, and then he went into PayPal, right? And the reason why I'm giving you that story is because again it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. If you want to be a businessman or an entrepreneur, great, go do that, solve for that. If you want to be a product manager, go do that, optimize for that, identify what are the gaps in your resume that are preventing you from doing that, and systematically start addressing those gaps, right? That would be my advice.
Absolutely. I'll just give you a quick example with it. So just right now, as we speak, one of our students, he is was is slash was entrepreneur. He spent about 1.5 2 years developing a SaaS product, got a couple of customers, but things didn't work out very well for him. COVID also kind of broke his back. But He joined our program, we helped him out, and now he has about 2 or 3 offers in hand. Okay, one from Ola, and that matters a lot, right? Because he is not from an engineering background. He's not from any of the NITs or any of the IITs or whatsoever. He is in fact from a. He has actually done a BSc. Okay, he's actually done a BSc, that too in economics. Okay, and he became a product manager. He has an offer from Ola right now. Um, right, so completely different background, right? But he was able to do that because he became an entrepreneur and he gave a honest attempt at it. Okay, number one. Number two, during the early days of my grooming, my mentoring with him, he was actually very depressed. Okay, depressed is a very harsh word, but he was actually a little underconfident. Okay, because if your product has not worked out or if your company has not worked out, obviously everybody will be underconfident. In his case, if I pitch myself as an entrepreneur, people ask how many customers you had. I just had 2 big customers. I just did like X thousand dollars of revenue, so it's not big enough. So people are going to look at me as a very you're not successful. I said you need to look at yourself as successful because you at least made an attempt. How many people out there actually are can claim that? How many product managers who are attempting to join Ola can claim that I was an entrepreneur and I made an honest attempt and I understand the shit. I actually deliver it. And how many can claim that? Very few. Same thing here, Udit. You need to, like Anuj mentioned, you need to first identify whether you are doing this because you want to be a product manager. So then optimize for that. Do this, but optimize for that. Okay. Just like as an entrepreneur, either you're making a company for your for a lifetime, that I'm going to do this forever, or I'm building this out so that I can sell it to somebody else. Your approach to building the product is going to be very very different between between these two setups, right? Doesn't want to hear me. Okay. Kush. Hi, Kush.
Yeah, hi Dalvinder.
Yes. So, Kush, any questions? Like, what's your background?
I'm currently doing my MBA second
Uh-huh.
year from Brandeis University, that is based out of Boston.
Okay.
So it's a winter break, so I've come back to India. So I'm applying for the jobs in the US, but with little success. Just wanted to have this session to get some idea about like what is the right approach.
Got it. Got it. So, if you're doing an MBA, that's going to be a very good. I mean, that's a good entry point to be a PM. But then again, I mean, it depends honestly on few things like what kind of companies you're applying for. Like I said in the very beginning, that consider this as a sales process. You will not sell everything to anyone. So you'll be very precise, you'll be very targeted that, okay, I am an MBA with this kind of background. So this kind of companies are going to appreciate my background. So I'm going to go there. Right. So for example, this guy I was talking about, the entrepreneur guy I was talking about, he did economics, right? So I said, your background will be appreciated by financial companies or companies or for roles which have some finance background because you'll be able to grasp those funders and at least there is some alignment. And in Ola also, he got into the Ola Financial Services, which is the Ola Money and everything else, right? So, Kush, we will speak more separately. I think
Sure,
we are
sure. Yeah, yeah,
all also scheduled, right?
yeah.
Okay, Radhika, what do you do and what are you looking for?
But so I began my career with TechM, and then I've been part of 2 startups, and we have built a product from scratch. Like, so I've been through that journey, and I'm just looking at what my next career move can be. So I think that's why I thought I'll just get some insights from veterans like you who've been there and done that.
Right. Right. Okay. I think the question to ask for yourself is what is the risk appetite that you have, and how much what matters to you, cash, ESOP, or how soon do you want to? You know? I think once you define that, everything else kind of comes into picture.
Um, so yeah, I mean, of course, ESOPs are definitely the most interesting part of being in a startup. But I'm just looking at learning from the big companies also in my going forward. So I've been there, done that from scratch, built a team, built a product, and our product has a good traction. So we are in a B2B space. We are a logistics intelligence platform. So
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to see and learn from all the already established companies and what are the best practices. So I'm looking to a different level of learning as
Understood.
well.
So please impress Anuj and ask him to take you. Radhika, I would love to speak to you separately on this.
Sure, sure.
Right? Because the juncture that you're talking about is something that happens quite often, especially about 5 years, 8 years in, where you have done a bunch of things, and
Yeah.
then you it's kind of very difficult as to, because there are only two or three bets you are left with. So which bet to pick up, right? Which bet to really double down on? It becomes a little harder. I get that. Okay. There are a few questions here. I just saw there are a few questions about the in the agenda, and I'll just pick up some of these questions because this is my past experience of the kind of questions people ask, and sometimes they are a little not too comfortable asking, which is how much salary can you expect as a product manager? Right, the money question. Anuj.
Yeah, again, I think that's a very hard one to answer, to be honest, because there are a lot of contextual factors that play into the salary component of it, right? One of the factors is obviously your experience or past experience, right? Second factor is what was your past compensation, right? Third factor is what is the current compensation structure of the company, right? A lot of companies today pay in ESOPs, which is a big part of the compensation. Then the fourth structure is how do interviewers view your skill and your fitment, right? At what level do they view that in the organization? For example, are you an entry level product manager versus are you a senior product manager or a director product manager, right? So all of those aspects kind of play into the salary bit of it, right? Uh, and I think typically what I've seen is that and again it boils down to which companies are we really targeting for, right? So most companies typically what they do is that they have a band of or they have a salary range in which they offer these compensations depending on whether you qualify for that band, right? I think product management, given that it's a very hot discipline, it's a great discipline to be in, it's a good career path, right? Uh, Initial salary to me matters less, right? Because the growth aspect of it is actually very, very high, right? I see product managers who have basically doubled their salaries in as short a duration as 3 years, which is a great place to be in, right? So that's a mental model in which I would think about it, right? Especially for folks who want to make a transition into product management, right? I think obviously salary part is important, but you should also think about that. Hey, if this is a new function that you're going into, there's a lot of learnability in that new function as well, right? So you should be willing to accept that as well, and then accordingly consider what salaries you want to go at.
Absolutely. I think the few factors. So there are certain factors which influence whether you get a higher salary, lower salary, and so on. Like what kind of company, what kind of sector. Certain sectors pay very well, certain sectors don't pay very well. B2B, certain companies pay very well, certain companies don't pay at all. For example, similarly, how stable the company is. For example, if you go to Ola right now, the salaries will not be very high. Versus certain other companies who will say, "आ जाओ बस, जो उठाना उठा लो तुम." But if I give you a very simple benchmark, a typical entry role would be in the, like an APM would be getting in the 10 to 20 range, anywhere in that. The average APM gets about 15 lakhs, plus minus 3 lakhs, depending on what kind of company, what kind of startup you are entering, where are you entering. Um, a typical PM will make in the 20-30 bracket. Okay. A typical senior PM would make in the 30 to 40 bracket. Okay. Now from senior product manager, then the things become very fuzzy. Okay. Because after that, either you'll stay in the individual contributor role or you'll become a team player. Okay. If you are an individual contributor role, you'll become a PPM, that is a principal product manager, in which case the 40 to 50 or 50 to 60 bracket is where you'll start landing up in. And which is where you start capping out somewhat. Okay. While if you become a people manager, in that case, you can again get 40 to 60, somewhere in that range. But depending on how amazing you have done in the past, like senior product manager, whatever else you have done in the past, basis that you might even get 70, you might even get 1 CR, even 1.5 CR, you can get that. Okay. Um, Now comes the ESOP factor. Okay. The ESOP factor is something that you really need to be, look at, not look at the, you need to think like an investor. Let me put it that way. Okay. So getting ESOP in a company which is plateaued or about kind of plateaued, it doesn't help you too much. Okay. So what you're looking for is, for example, getting an ESOP in Byju's right now is not going to be very helpful. What are the odds of going from a decacorn to $100 billion, or even 10xing or even 5xing in 4 years? Very, very limited, right? Extremely limited, very less odds. So getting ESOPs in Byju's is not very effective for us, for anybody of us, right? But getting that in, let's say, a Vedantu or a Topper is relatively high, because if Byju's did this in 5 years, there's a good chance Vedantu or Topper might become a $1 billion company in, let's say, another 3 years or 4 years. So getting that ESOP might be much more valuable. Think like an investor that way. Okay. Now, depending on what kind of your sustenance requirements are, what kind of luxury requirements you have, and how much you trust ESOPs, you can choose to get the entire fixed amount, or you can get the ESOPs. Yeah. But the range remains something like that: the 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and then 40 onwards, it's all fuzzy, right? How much you can negotiate, as well as where you are landing up. Anybody has any questions about salaries? Because that question comes up too many times.
I have a different question, Talvinder, if I may ask.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I have a question for Anuj. Anuj, since you're from Amazon, I wanted to understand that anyone who is trying to get into Amazon into product management role, apart from the basic product management skills, what are the other skills that one should acquire if they really want to get into a company like Amazon?
Sure. And that's a great question, right? I think Amazon, given where it is right now, I would suspect that it is on the list of a lot of us here. I think the way Amazon typically recruits is around one, obviously the skill set, right? Which the course, the pragmatic leaders course would cover, right? But I think the other equally important part of the Amazon culture is around leadership principles, right? So Amazon has 40 leadership principles around which it would understand your experiences and how you have demonstrated some of those leadership principles in the past, right? To give you an example, one of the leadership principles that Amazon has is disagree and commit, right? Which means that a typical question around that would be, give me an example where you disagreed with your manager, right? Explain the situation. Why did you disagree, right? How did you communicate that disagreement, and what was the outcome, right? And throughout that scenario, Amazon would, the interviews would try to understand how did you display that, how did you display the right traits in terms of disagreeing, right? Did you kind of give the reasons to your leadership in terms of whether they are thinking the right direction or whether they are thinking the wrong direction, right? And were you able to influence them to your way of thinking? And if the answer is yes, how? If the answer is no, then why did you change your mind, right? Was it simply because he was a manager, he or she was a manager, you kind of changed your mind? Or was it because you were caring about the customer and then you came around to a view that, hey, no, what they were saying was indeed right? So there are these 14 leadership principles around which you would be expected to ask, you'd be expected to answer questions from your previous experiences. Now, particularly when you go into Amazon recruitment cycle, the recruiter would share, these leadership principles with you, and then the recruiter would specifically ask you to prepare your interviews around that as well. So that is how Amazon interviews are structured.
Okay, thank you for that, Anuj. But those are the behavioral skills that they're testing with those items, I guess. I was asking more about the technical skills. If anyone need to have any kind of because AWS, right? So any cloud specific knowledge that one need to have. If one is looking for a product manager, if one is trying to get into a product management role in Amazon, is that something that is required, or one can get that knowledge after getting into Amazon?
Yeah, I think you asked a bunch of different questions there. So let me just answer. The biggest one that you try to ask, which is around how do they evaluate on your hard skills, right? And I think that answer also comes from a leadership principles point of view, right? So, for example, the question that somebody would ask you is that give me an example with delivered results in a short span of time, right? And that example could be that, hey, we were running into a conversion problem in the shopping funnel in my previous company, and we realized that we have to maximize conversion or we have to double conversion. Now I took these 3 steps to improve the conversion from X to Y, right? These are, and during that process you'll be able to demonstrate your hard leadership, your hard technical skills, right, as part of that particular answer, right? So that is how a lot of your questions will be answered. Now, in addition to that, what Amazon also does is from a product management tool, especially entry level, is to give you some case studies as well. So, for example, they would ask you to do a market sizing problem, or they would ask you to do a, let's say, a customer research problem, right? Solve for that, right? During the interviews as well, right? So that is how they would assess your technical skills, right? And I think to answer your second question around, hey, interviewing for an AWS versus a non-AWS role, right? Of course, some of these roles are technical, right? But in Amazon, typically these are not like the binding constraints, right? So even if you don't have the complete technical background, even then you might be considered for an AWS role as well, or you might even get into that.
Okay, thank you, Anuj.
Awesome. There's one very interesting last question, which is how do you build the skills to be a PM in the 21st century? Now, this is, I think, this is $1 million question. How do you develop skills to be a PM or to be anything, I believe, but yeah, in the current context, to be a PM, how do you build skills? Anuj, what do you think? How do you build skills?
I think my simple answer or my simple approach, which I've seen work very well in a lot of cases, is moving fast, right? Which is around experimenting, iterating, keep on learning, right? If you're able to demonstrate that into your product velocity, right, you would realize that a lot of the things, would automatically fall in place, right? So, for example, big companies today, they were built by not, first creating a grand vision deck of, hey, this is what a product will be, right? Instead, they were built on incremental iterations, right? Of course, we all love to quote Steve Jobs, and we all love to emulate him, his iPhone and his iPods, and right, all of those. But I think most of us are not Steve Jobs, right? And taking that example would be doing a disservice to ourselves as well. I would, what I've seen, works well in most cases, and Amazon is a great example of that, is those incremental iterations. If you're able to, iterate another product incrementally, consistently, day in and day out, learn from your releases, right, improve upon those and create even better products, I think that is a fundamental skill set that, is required for anybody to succeed in product management going forward.
Absolutely. I think moving fast and learning by doing, I think that's the second statement I'll say, that, learn by doing. Okay. There are too many people spending too much time looking for the next big book, the next big video, the next big article, which will magically just give you all the skills. In skills are learned by doing. That's all. There's nothing. There's no other replacement. I can give you ज्ञान सवेरे से लेकर रात तक कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. Nothing will change for you unless and until you actually pick that gyan and you start implementing it. Somebody mentioned about that bubble.io. I wonder how many of you actually who have not heard of no code platforms will go and explore bubble.io and say, okay, I have 1,000 ideas. I can perhaps implement this weekend. Let me try that. And I'll put that up in my resume that, hey, I built out this product. You can go and explore it. How many of you will try to do that? I don't know. Right. So learning by doing, I believe, is the best way to learn, to acquire skills, especially when it comes to PM. PM honestly is one of the biggest reasons why it is hard to break into PM is because it's a very experiential role. Okay, it's a very experiential role. People expect you to have hands-on skills, where you're just not ratifying and you're not blabbering things which you have read in books. And 5 years back, 6 years back, it was okay because even if you have read that book, even that was considered amazing. Oh my god, okay, koi to hai jisko ye sare terms pata hai, right? Even that was okay 5 years, 6 years, 10 years back. Now it is not okay. In fact, if you just reiterate whatever was mentioned in that book, people will assume that you are just a bookish PM who is trying to be a PM. So, so while read books, I'm not denying that. Watch videos, not denying that. But uh, please be inclined or lean towards action. If you watch 1 hour of something, you have seen us speaking for the past 1 hour. You have seen somebody or read something for 1 hour. Spend at least 3 hours, 4 hours implementing at least one of those ideas. At least doing one of those things. Okay. Otherwise, you're not doing anything for yourself. Okay? I think that's the most critical thing I'll mention in terms of learn how to build skills in a PM. Now, which skills to build, etc., etc., that's a different ball game altogether. It depends on what's your ambition, what kind of money you want to make. For example, if you want to make 50 lakhs, I believe a lot of people would like to make 50 lakhs in a year. Uh, there are only select few product managers who can get that money. Okay. Now you need to identify, okay, 50 lakh kaun dega mujhe, right? And there will be certain companies who can pay you. There are certain roles that will pay you. For example, if you become an AI product manager today, there's a good chance you can make 50 lakhs because there are very few of them, right? But you'll also have to slog your ass off because you'll have to learn a lot of stuff, right? But then it will be worth it, correct? But then the skill set required is going to be very, very different. Versus if you want to be in a very stable company, मुझे Amazon में जाना है, मुझे वहीं बुड्ढे होकर मरना है, for example.
Hey,
Right?
Amazon is not stable, man.
Okay, Microsoft. A lot of people want to be in Microsoft. Let's take an
So,
example.
yes, sorry. In case people interpreted it wrongly, what I meant is that Amazon is a startup.
Yeah,
It's a $1 trillion startup, but it is a startup.
right. It's very dynamic. I have few other friends in Amazon. It's incredibly dynamic. Versus Microsoft, for example, if you want to be in Microsoft and you want to be there for the next 20 years, in that case, you need a very different set of skills, right? And you would want to prepare in a very different way. Right? But irrespective of what your goal is, the only way to do that is by learning by doing. No degree, no certification, nothing will matter. What matters is your skills. Please aim to improve them and work your ass off towards that. Um, uh, Small side note, about 10 years back, actually. So it's been, so straight out of college, I started doing entrepreneurship when it was not cool at all by far. Right? When जिसकी job नहीं लगती वो entrepreneurship करता. That was the idea. Uh, 10 years back. उस time पे, what used to happen was a lot of people wanted to be entrepreneurs, but they didn't want to jump to do entrepreneurship. They didn't want to start something. They want to be entrepreneur. They want to talk about the jargon. They want to do all this stuff, but they will not jump. They will not take that leap of faith because it's risky. It's scary. It scares the shit out of people. So what is the next best thing they would do? They will watch a ton of things. They will attend every talk, mixer, or whatever else that there is. And there was a ton of articles that started coming up. There was a term that came up, okay, which was entrepreneur. Okay, there's entrepreneur because it doesn't give you anything. It's just random stuff that is out there. Same old stuff getting repeated, and you are attending every little session out there, and so that you can just talk in cool stuff. But no, dude, I'm thinking of being an entrepreneur next year. Right now, I'm in a job, so I'll get my next appraisal, and then I'll become a founder. Anybody who's thinking about next appraisal is not going to become a founder. Let's be honest. Yeah. So similarly, nowadays I hear a lot about product managers who want to be product manager but do not want to take that leap of faith or do not want to jump in and put in the work required for it. Okay, don't be that person. Put in the work. It's a very rewarding field. It's a very, very good discipline. Best part is you are right now at the best time in that entire Indian ecosystem where product managers are being appreciated, they are being recognized, and they're getting paid. Okay. 2-3 साल पहले they were considered glorified project managers. Yes, dude. Yes. I know. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So they were considered glorified project managers. And so it was very, very hard to get paid, but now they are getting paid. So please leverage that time. Perfect time to be in this role. Anuj, I think that's where I would like to end my side of monologue. Anuj, what do you think?
One of the other things I'm noticing these days is that because of this COVID pandemic, a lot of the jobs are now going to move, to remote locations, right? And by remote locations, I don't, mean, just working from home, but what I also mean is that a lot of the companies that are based abroad, in Europe or in Southeast Asia or in US, for example, they will start thinking about moving some of these jobs to offshore locations as well. And I
Absolutely.
think that's a windfall gain for India, where companies will, first of all, there's a cost arbitrage obviously as well, because the same level of skill set in India versus USA, the cost difference is huge. But the other piece is that the sheer talent that Indians bring to the table in terms of our diligence, our work ethic, right? That is like really valued in the industry, right? So I think this is also the right time to be to be in this ecosystem, because you will realize that a market has suddenly opened up for you that did not exist before, right? And I'm seeing that right now. So that's where it's a very exciting time to be in this industry.
Absolutely. And I think one more thing, just because you mentioned about the COVID impact, I think the other COVID impact is, which our students are now leveraging, is the fact that now every company is digital. Otherwise, they thought of themselves to be digital, but now they are building digital products to be able to reach their customers as well as to reach their employees, right?
Right.
So they are digital left, right, and they have to be digital throughout. So they need a lot of digital architects. Who is that digital architect? That's a product manager. So perfect time, actually, perfect time. The companies who would not even have like imagined to be a digital company are now digital, completely digital. They're talking to us, they're talking to me that भाई ये कैसे करें, वो कैसे करें, लोग हैं क्या, ये करते क्या है, उनको पता भी नहीं कि there's a term called product manager. Then I tell them कि okay, there's a product manager. Otherwise they talk about कि project manager चाहिए जो product बना दे, जो project बना दे, software बना दे, website बना दे, app बना दे, right? Best time to be leverage 2021. Okay, 2020 is the lost year. Be found in 2021. I think that's my uh, captcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where I think I'll pause. Anuj, you. I think you had some meeting as well. Thank you so much for extending the time. If there is any other question, we can take one last question, and that's where we will end. If you have any other further questions which you would like to rather discuss personally, please feel free to reach out, and me or Anuj, depending on the question, will answer for sure. Anybody? One last question. Okay. So I guess nobody has any questions. Either we were amazing or very boring. I
No,
will.
it was amazing. Yeah, actually, yeah, it was just in my mind like I want to start with this learning, but yeah, it was really helpful. But just not, might be like my situation. Like I'm not talking because I'm really inspired now on the Friday, especially Friday evening. I'm still working, but yeah, now much inspired to do something in weekend. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for
So
arranging
feel
it.
free to reach out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words. And feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. The session was insightful. Thank you very much for the session.
Awesome. And Piyush has just shared a link. If you have any questions, if you want to discuss further, please feel free to book a call, and me or somebody from the admissions team is going to speak to you. And by the way, while we say admissions, the idea throughout is to counsel. जैसे अभी मैं बात कर रहा हूँ वैसे ही बात करेंगे. Whether it product management is for you, whether our program is for you, etc. We talk very, very honestly, very, very directly, and I think that's the reason why our success rates, etc., have been pretty amazing. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for
Thank
attending.
you. The session was very useful. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time and for your
Thank you, Anuj. Thank you,
Thank
Anuj.
you.
Thank you, Anuj. Thank
Bye.
you, Kalandri.